ever have translated oaks because oak has a single leaf, regardless of the shape of it. There's over 60 varieties of oaks in the United States, and they all got different shaped leaves and different qualities, but they're oak trees. But the terebinth tree is in the cashew family. They can collect the gum and stuff that oozes out of the bark and other growths on the bark, and they're medicinal and all sorts of things. So the translator shouldn't get the trees mixed up and quote the wrong thing, and that's not worth a whole lot to you, but just in case somebody ever asks and you get into a little deal where you can be the top guy by answering the question, that'd be anyway. Jehovah appeared to him, and as he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day, and he lifted up his eyes and he looked, and 2 and 3 men stood over against him, and when he saw them, he ran to meet them. Now, Moses doesn't say he got up. He was sitting down, so I assume he had to get up to run. So, we have to read a lot into these things sometimes when we're just giving the skinny on what's really happened. He ran to meet him from the tent door, and he bowed himself to the earth. Now, you got commentators that argue over that and says, well, he shouldn't have done that. Well, the Oriental, we got to remember, the Hebrews and all this area is Asia, Oriental people, and they've got Oriental customs. And so whether he was worshiping God at the time, don't think he knew right at the moment. But I think that his bow was to welcome his guest as the Orientals would do. Now, that's my version. You can put a nickel in the meter and take it, or just not worry about it. But anyway, the 3 men were not men at all. I'm not reading from the Bible now. It was the Lord himself accompanied by 2 angels. Nevertheless, they had appearance of being men. Now, even though they ate dinner with Abraham. Now, he prepared. He said, and my Lord, if I found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let now a little water be fetched and wash your feet. Those sandals they wore let them get their feet real dirty walking in the soil. So Orientals, they, don't come in here to my tent on my Persian carpet without washing your feet. Anyway. And rest yourselves under the tree. By the way, these terebinth trees grew in groves, so there was probably 10 or 12 or more of them. And they smelled good, and they made a nice shade. I'm back on the trees in the botany now. They're not a large tree. They only grow to about 35 feet in height. You could call them a large bush if you wanted to. But that's more information just, that you didn't ask for today. Let you know about it. But that was a nice place in a hot desert type area to go rest in the shade and in the daytime, even at noon. And I don't know how long these guys had to sit there, because Abraham ran in and he told Sarah, says, get 3 measures of flour and make some cakes. That was more than 3 gallons worth of flour, depending on which measurements you want to use. That was a lot of cake, my friends, bread, whatever. But anyway, he said, I'll fetch a morsel of bread and strengthen your heart. After that ye shall pass on for as much as you're come to your servant. And they said, so do. as thou hast said. And again, this Oriental, strangers coming by, take care of them, make them comfortable, feed them, and whatever. So Abraham hastened. You know how old he was? Well, Sarah was 90, because she about to be told that she's going to have a child. Abraham's up, and he hastened. Now, he'd already ran to meet the guys, so he must have been in pretty good shape for his age. And I guess what I'm doing, maybe it's not necessary, but I like to look at the Scripture and say, here's what really happened. We're not told everything, but to accomplish all of this, what has to take place to do that? And so he ran out into his herd. Now, I don't know how far the herd was from the tents, but he ran out there, and he selected a nice calf, one to be good and tender, probably a little fat around over the rib eyes and everything. And he gave it to one of his servants, and he hasted to dress it. And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed and set it before them, and he stood by them under the trees, and they did eat. Now, folks, I've butchered a few calves and pigs, lambs, whatever. You don't do it in 15 minutes, let alone cook it. So I think they were there all day. I mean, Sarah's still trying to mix all that 3 gallons worth of flour into cakes and get them baked. And I don't know, her microwave didn't work too well in those days. I don't even know if she had a rock oven. What I'm trying to get you to do is think about what it took. Abraham and Sarah received God and 2 angels in the form of men, and they treated them as style of the country and the custom of the country in that day and time. And they laid out a meal. Now, I understand from some of the commentaries that the butter was really yogurt. I don't know, I wasn't there. So, who knows? But with all that cake from all that meal that they made 3 gallons worth, a lot of butter to be used. So I think that'd be good. And I understand that maybe some of the commentators think that it was against Hebrew law to serve milk and meat together. And I'm going to tell you, the law hadn't come in yet. This is Abraham. He's just now the first Hebrew. So we need to be careful about how we're making things up and deciding what's going on. But anyway, in this, nothing is said of the cooking of the meat or other preparations that was made, but it emphasizes speed, hasten, all of that. So anyway, that's probably enough on that subject. Let's go on to the next. But anyway, I said 3 gallons. We could turn that into, it was about 13 quarts. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I have noticed selling at the farmer's market and stuff, how many people don't realize how many cups are in a pint, how many pints in a quart, how many quarts in a gallon. They don't know a peck and a bushel and a half bushel and so on for peaches sown. I don't know what's been taught in the school, or people have forgot measurements, let alone getting into the metric system. That's something else. We're skipping on down now to verse 9. And they said unto him, Where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, Behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee when the season cometh around. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard in the tent door which was behind him. She was standing, I didn't know that the tents had doors, but apparently it's pretty fancy. And she's standing there listening to what's going on. Eavesdropping on the couple. This is the son that's been promised him. This is the son that Sarah thought she couldn't have, and she gave Hagar to Abram, and they had Ishmael and so on. Going to cause a lot of trouble, you know. But here is the fact. Now let's see what her response was. By this time now, Abraham knows who his guests are, doesn't he? It doesn't say that, but we know from what's being said here that Abraham has to know that this is God. His guest, he says, you're going to have a son. This is son being promised. So, up to this point, the identity probably hadn't really been known, but by this time he knows. Can we fault Sarah as being faithless, not believing? Because Hebrews 11:11 says, whatever Sarah's initial impression might have been, she was promptly to receive concrete and convincing evidence that God himself was their guest. And they said unto him, and he said, I will certainly return. So anyway, this is promised is coming, and Abraham and Sarah now in verse 11 were old and well stricken in age, and had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. And Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? But Hebrews said that she had faith to be the mother. So she was kind of questioning herself. But you know what we learned from this? All things are possible with God. All things are possible with God. And this is a demonstration. Now let's go back just a little bit. He called Abram out of the land of Ur, brought him up, a Haran, on around down into Canaan, says, I'm going to give you all this land. Abraham's family were idol worshipers. I see that God is testing the steel in this man and making him into the man that he needs to be, because God has known this man from the time before he was even born. And we have to think about that and what God is doing. He's teaching. But, you know, from a human standpoint, it was impossible for a woman long after the onset of menopause to give birth to a child. And Sarah's derisive laughter seemed to her to be the most appropriate response to what the stranger had said. And yet it was not fully evident to her that God himself was behind the promise. So Sarah's still trying to get this down. I think maybe Sarah had given up. She's 90 years old. Now, people still live to be 120 or 30 or 40 at this time. God shortened the length of man after the flood, but they're still living a pretty long time, because we're going to see later that after she dies, Abraham marries Keturah and has another 6 sons that's going to make 6 more tribes of Arabs over there to deal with. But anyway, I can't say the Hebrew name that we translate Isaac, but the name Isaac is usually given as laughter. So Sarah laughed, and God's going to name the son Isaac. Now, what did I say? God named him. He named Ishmael. He named him Isaac. He visited Elizabeth and told her son would be born and be John. So God has named him, but since he was given his name as after, he was by his very name a perpetual reminder to both Abraham and Sarah that in a genuine sense, he was a supernatural gift from God and called forever afterwards the son of promise. Verse 13, and Jehovah said unto Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of surety bear a child who am old? Is anything too hard for Jehovah at the set time? I will return unto thee when the season cometh around, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. He said, nay, but you did laugh. Yeah. God knows what's going on. He knows. We can't do anything. Is anything too hard? Verse 14, we're talking about some people call this the mountain peak of verses in the Bible simply because the thing, is anything too hard for the Lord? Because with God all things are possible, Matthew 19:26. He who created all things surely controls all things. And he who enacted the laws of nature can change them if he will. Well, we know he made the earth, sun stand still, so to speak. Made it even back up for one king to demonstrate. And actually, science can't deny that. Scientists have, however I don't know how they figure the rotations of the earth and so on, life going back around, but they say that actually happened, so that's how they figured that out, I don't know. But anyway, like one man can taste soil and tell whether there's oil under it or not. But anyway, that all works. But anyway, everything has now been settled. Sarah's going to have a son. His name's going to be Isaac. And he'll be back to see to that in the season a year from now. So everything is settled. Abraham and Sarah have new names. They're no longer Abram and Sarai. Well, Joe changed that last week, but anyway. Anyway, there for a while you get used to saying Abram, and you have to watch your tongue because it's easier to say Abraham. So now we can say Abraham and Sarah. All right, that's the end of all that now. That's where Joe should have taken us. That's where the chapter should have ended instead of where it did. But we didn't have anything to do with making the verses in the chapter. Somebody else did that a long time ago. So we're going to enter into something new and exciting now. We're going to see something first. It's a first. And the men arose from thence and looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way, and Jehovah said, now, I'm concerned about just this. who was Jehovah talking to when he said this? Was he thinking to himself? How did Moses know this? Well, he was told by God, led by the Holy Spirit to write all of this. But he says, shall I hide from Abraham that which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. So there's our promise again in what's going to happen and why Abraham's important. So they rose up and they looked toward Sodom. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I've never been over there, but according to all of the information I can find, if they saw Sodom, they had walked 3 miles from the trees, terebinth trees, and up on the hill, and then they could see Sodom and all of the land before, because that goes down to the deepest spot on earth below sea level. The Dead Sea, Salt Sea, or whatever you want to call it. The bottom of it's the deepest place on earth. And there sits Sodom and Gomorrah and Zor, and I just forgot the name of the other little town. But anyway, old man problems. Anyway, they were looking. God had it in his mind. And he's gonna let Abraham know about what's going on. And so therefore God's, all that's happening here, we can see that God's revelation to Abraham recorded here was designed to serve as a warning to the ultimate fate that shall befall all unrighteousness. Keep that in mind as we discuss what's fixing to happen. So God has said, well, I'm going to tell him, for I have known him to the end that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of Jehovah, to do righteousness and justice, to the end that Jehovah may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. So this is a key reason for Abraham being chosen. Now, God, that kind of gives us a reason why God selected. You got anything you want to add?
I think it's a real important point you're making, though.
Okay, that's
what. Really reasoning with himself about why he wants to tell Abraham.
That's right.
It's a valid reason.
Valid reason. And the reason why is because he knows Abraham now and what he's done.
Just the way God has given us his word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I highlighted all that in orange highlighter so I remembered to get this point. But it's important. He said, for I have known him. Does God know you? Yeah, he does. He knows all of us. Good, bad, indifferent, whatever. We all need to remember that God knows us. Adam and Eve couldn't even hide from God in the Garden of Eden. We sure can't hide today, and we got big buildings and thick walls and everything. But he knows Abraham can do this. And to do what? To do righteousness and justice to the end. Well, let's see what happens then. As I say, this is a key reason why Abraham was chosen to be the head of the select people chosen to perpetuate the name and worship of God upon earth. And I got down here 2 or 3 different translations, but the best is, for I know him, that he will command his children after him, and that's just plain King James Version. 1 or 2 other versions are pretty much the same way, and in the household and so on is the same. So we won't worry about that. That clock runs fast, doesn't it? Well, we may still finish before we get clock runs out. But anyway, okay.
He wanted to make sure that Abraham could teach his children how to obey the Lord.
Absolutely.
Bottom line.
But just think, God hasn't given the law through Moses yet, and he's already got some laws under the patriarchal system. We haven't mentioned that in a while in here, but we're under the patriarchal system. The old patriarch, the head of the family or tribe or so on, takes care of everything. You obey him. If you don't, you get put outside the camp, don't get fed. But Abraham is the head patriarch really here at this time. Great nation's going to come from him. The promise that God made to him on that land that he brought him as a stranger into. He didn't really give it to Abraham. He says, your offspring. They're going to be in Egypt 430 years, and then they're going to come back. I'd call that planning in advance. And that's another lesson for us. If you've ever thought about it, planning for tomorrow is one thing, planning for next year is another, but planning for your life into eternity is the most important planning that you can do. And that needs to be planned early. It needs to be planned early. People that make a haphazard guess at it don't always make it. If you fall off on the slippery side of the hill, it's hard to climb back up. Plan in advance. And God has got this all planned out for us. If it wasn't so, then he wouldn't have been able to tell Abraham that 430 years your whole tribe, your whole family. He said it's going to be more than, you can't count the stars, it's going to be more than that. And I'll guarantee you, if you sit down and do a little studying, when they come out of Egypt in the Exodus, there was more than 1 million of his offspring. So God had planned, tell him ahead of time, okay, Abraham. But let's see what's going to happen here. We see here, it says, and the men turned from thence. Now, Abraham had walked with them a little ways. He was going with them. And now, just 2 men going down. It's the 2 angels. God and Abraham apparently stayed back. We're not told what happened to God. I imagine he took care of himself, no problem, so we won't worry about that. But the men turned from thence and went toward Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before Jehovah. So Jehovah's still here right now. Just the 2 men going on down. And this, Abraham pleads with God to spare the execution of the wicked cities. And the 2 angels were sent on their way to Sodom. But Jehovah remained and heeded the plea of Abraham. So let's look at that.
In verse 21, where God tells Abraham, I'm going to go down and check it out and make sure what I've heard is accurate. Right?
Yeah, I missed that, didn't I?
Verse 21.
Yeah, I skipped to 22. I'm sorry. He said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down and now see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it which it come up unto me. If not, I will know. I turned that page and I actually skipped that top part. I'm sorry.
God already knew.
But yeah, God knew.
But he was telling Abraham.
But he is discussed with himself whether to tell Abraham, and he's decided to. So now he's telling him. Their sin is very grievous. The whole city, everybody. You know, we're talking about two cities here, really. Now, let's think about Lot a little bit. You know, he got carried off once, and it seems that he tended to sit in the gate of the city and maybe be one of the heads of the household and tell people what to do or welcome people, guests coming in. But this is a sinful city. And Lot has got there with just 2 daughters and a wife and all of his servants and all of his flocks.
More than that, don't he? He had like a couple daughters stayed there.
Oh, really? We're going to discuss that in a minute.
Hey, while I'm talking, I had something. When that patriarchal dispensation, it's like God talks to like Abraham, Lot, this and that, but how does he deal, like, does he in big cities just have a prophet that talks to them like Melchizedek or call them a priest, and does he go to talk to this group of people, or does God actually talk to each head of household individually? You know, that's what I don't understand. If it's a patriarchal dispensation and he's talking to heads of household, does he just pick the heads of household he wants to, and the other ones he just like has prophets to tell a whole town, or what?
No, I don't think he picked the ones he wanted to. I think he picked the ones that was obedient to him. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had a priest called Melchizedek. Or Moses' father-in-law wouldn't have been a priest, and he was a Midianite, you know. God had not picked a special people at this time. He's preparing Abraham to be the father of a special people. But all of the peoples of the world, the head of the family was the patriarch that guided them spiritually. And if they were obedient, I'm going to presume, and that's dangerous, that God somehow or another communicated, the Holy Spirit or somebody communicated with them. We have evidences of that in the Bible with the patriarchs that's listed for us. He visited with Abraham. He visited with Isaac. He visited with Jacob. He told Moses what to do. Now, how he communicated, I don't know. It wasn't teletype. And it wasn't Instagram. I think God had a better Wi-Fi system than what we have today. Now, I don't know that that's the proper answer. Joe's going to have to answer the rest of it.
I just like, the sin there in those cities, was there someone before Abraham that told them what they were doing was wrong? You know, it's like if sin is.
Well, I think there was, like he had sent prophets to them later on, but at this time, I even got, I've skipped it, but I got 2 pages stuff I copied out of Josephus about this very thing going on. And he wasn't very well enlightened either, even though he was a historian. But I think he got everything from scriptures he could. But apparently, as long as a people, and that's usually a tribe, and the chief or the head was the grandpa or great-grandpa or whoever the elder still was alive, he visited with them somehow. They knew what to do and how to live as long as they took and obeyed God's laws. But we don't have much history telling us about all that, Jack. I'm sorry. You know, maybe Jeff back there tell you, or William over here. Well, Joe, you got anything to say on the subject?
No, we don't have a lot of information about it in Scripture.
Oh, I was right in what I said then.
I think so.
We don't.
But God did communicate what he wanted people to know.
Yes, somehow or another. Ermedine? Right.
He may have been trying to teach.
Well, he could have.
But we do have other examples through the Bible, even after Moses, where God talked to kings, our leaders of other nations,
Yes, he did.
when they would listen.
He even selected the people to be kings of other nations. Had his prophets go do it even, you know, anoint them. So I don't know and understand how he was communicating to them, whether he was coming down and speaking to them in a language they could understand, or they'd go into trance and then come out of it and have the information. I mean, there's several ways that could have happened. But anyway, thank you for bringing that up. I'm sorry I even had part of that highlighted. Why I missed it, turned the page messed up. Anyway.
But we can just go by Hebrews, what Hebrews tells us. He spoke to them in the past, to the fathers and the prophets.
Right.
That pretty much sums it up.
Well, I think so. He was certainly speaking to Abraham when he was here in the form of a man. Jehovah was there. Okay, now let's go on. So the men turned from thence and went toward Sodom, and Abraham stood yet before Jehovah. That's back to where we were at. Chapter 18, verse 23. And Abraham drew near and said, now he's talking here, and Jehovah stayed back here. So I'm assuming he walked over real close to Jehovah. I don't know how close he could get. But he drew near and he said, wilt thou consume the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there are 50 righteous within the city. Now he's concerned about Lot, because Lot's family's down there in this big mess. And wilt thou consume and not spare the place for 50 righteous? I don't know how big the city was.
Bigger than Zoar. Zoar was a little city. That's all we know, isn't it?
Yeah, I know Zoar was a little drive through and blink, you missed it. But anyway, Sodom and Gomorrah and Zoar all down here. I don't know that there was even 12 miles separating them. They were all together, pretty close. And I'm saying 50 people might be a pretty big number for the amount of town. And then if there was 2,000 people there, then it wasn't. But, you know, we don't know what the population was. And I'd kind of like to know, but it doesn't matter. That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and so the righteous should be as the wicked. That be far from thee shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Oh, how did he have nerve to walk up to Jehovah and ask him that question? I mean, that took a lot of nerve, in my opinion. I wouldn't even ask a school teacher. I'd challenge a college professor a time or two, but in high school I knew better. We still had paddles back in those days. Anyway, watch this. This is Abraham's the first Jew, right? He's Hebrew. He's going to Jew God down. This is the first instance we have of a Jewish trader working here, and he's Jewing God down. Well, thou consume and not spare. This is, anyway, but to go up and say, shall not the judge of all earth do right? I think God was being very gentle and kind. God didn't lose his temper. We know he can get angry. He could have put his foot on Abraham and says, I'll just pick somebody else to be the head of the promise. But anyway, and Jehovah said, if I in Sodom find 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all of the place for their sake. And Abraham answered and said, behold now, I have taken up me to speak unto the Lord, who am but dust and ashes, peradventure. So he's trying to ask for a little forgiveness here in what he's saying now a little bit, but he's still going to ask. He said, there shall like 5 for the 50 righteous. In other words, if there's going to be 45, so it's like an auction, except it's going down instead of up. Wilt thou destroy all of the city for the lack of 5? And he said, I will not destroy it. If I find there are 40 and 5, and he spoke unto him yet again and said, peradventure, there shall be 40 found there. Okay, we're down from 50 and 45 down now to 40. And he said, I will not do it for the 40's sake. And he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry. I think Abraham was getting an idea here that he pushing his luck a little bit. And I will speak, peradventure there shall 30 be found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30. And he said, behold now, I have taken it upon me to speak unto the Lord, peradventure there shall be, we're down to 20. And he said, I will not destroy it for the 20's sake. And he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the 10's sake. Boom. They burned up. But Lot escaped. Who am I but dust and ashes? You know, how did Abraham know that? But he's done pushed it out, hey God, you're not going to destroy it if there's 50 people in there. Just think, how many of y'all would have had a straight and stiff enough back to walk up to God and argue with him? I mean, you really don't even want to argue with a policeman that stops you for speeding, even if you're just 2 miles over. But here Abraham is stood up to God. And I think he's done this because he actually loves Lot, because Lot's his nephew, his blood kin. And Lot's down there because Abraham gave him the choice of where to live so their herdsmen and everybody wouldn't fight, and they chose separate places. So let's put Lot down there. And Lot chose to go into the city to live. But God said they were grievous of sin, very bad. The sin of this city is so bad that God's going to destroy the whole city. You know, we're fortunate today because I think we've got that same problem real serious here today. And God isn't going to burn us up, I hope. Okay, Jehovah went his way, and as soon as he had left off communicating with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. God had judged Sodom, and you'll have to tune in next week to find out what happened. I think the bell's fixing to ring. Well, I got the last verse there. Right on time. I don't know why, according to that clock and my watch. Maybe. Any questions or anything? Anybody want to say anything? Joe's going to tell you about the fire next week.
So, sometimes you might think, how did Lot and his family get found righteous compared to what happened in the cave later?
I'm not sure I totally understood you. I can't hear that all that well.
He was judging who's righteous, right?
Right.
And Lot and his family, they're sent out because they're righteous, right? But
Well, at that point, they were called righteous. We're not talking about in the future. Joe's going to talk about that. Yeah, it was sure questionable what happens in the next chapter. Hermadine.
I'm just thinking we ought to take a good lesson from Abraham being bold to talk to God. We have the right to come boldly to the throne of God.
Yes, we can boldly talk to God, but what Abraham was doing, he was challenging something that I'm not sure that man ought to have been challenging, but God was patient. And I think we see God's patience in that.
I think he'll be patient with us as long as our attitude is.
Absolutely right. Attitude. Now, when you say that, then that changes a lot of things. Attitude is real important. It really is. I learned that one time. I had some plows get turned around. I was just a teenager on a cultivator, and the neighbor's irrigation water had run over onto our place, and I come out the end of the row and slid into Daddy's brand new barbed wire fence he just built, and had those I got mad and went kicking those cultivators, and I just tore my boots up. Hurt me. So I learned right quick, attitude is really important. Especially when you got to face your dad after you tore his new fence up. But anyway, thank y'all. Look for what's coming next week.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned.